every single one of you. We'd love to know, what part of the world are you watching from right now? Let us know in the comments. Now, let's dive into today's story. Lieutenant Corey Ramsey's office at the Portland Police Bureau was eerily quiet that Wednesday afternoon, save for the gentle hum of his computer and the occasional rustle of paper as he worked through a stack of case files. A fresh cup of coffee sat untouched, growing cold beside a framed photo of his family. Himself, his wife Lucia, and their daughter Jamie, all smiling at his promotion ceremony just last week. He reached for a new file, his wedding ring catching the light as he did so, when his phone buzzed against the desk's wooden surface. Jamie's face flashed on the screen, and a small smile tugged at his lips. His 16-year-old daughter rarely called during school hours, preferring to text instead. "Hey, sweetheart," he answered, already turning back to the case file. "Aren't you supposed to be in?" "Dad." Jamie's voice came through in a harsh whisper that made him freeze. There was fear there, raw and unmistakable, but something else too, rage. "Dad, come home now." Corey sat up straight, his hand automatically reaching for his service weapon, a reflex born from years on the force. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" "No, I'm." She took a shaky breath. "Mom's in the bedroom with two men. This isn't the first time. You need to catch them." The words hit him like physical blows, each one landing with devastating precision. The room seemed to tilt sideways for a moment, and he gripped the edge of his desk until his knuckles turned white. 16 years of marriage to Lucia Carver flashed through his mind in a kaleidoscope of memories. Their first date at that little Italian restaurant in the Pearl District, their wedding day when she'd worn her grandmother's pearls, the night Jamie was born and Lucia had looked at their daughter with such fierce love. How? His throat was suddenly dry. He cleared it and tried again, forcing himself to think like a cop rather than a husband. "How do you know they're in there?" "I came home early. Student council meeting was canceled." Jamie's voice dropped even lower. "I heard voices upstairs, thought Mom was on the phone at first, but then I heard a man laughing. I went closer and..." She choked back what sounded like a sob. "Dad, I recognized one of them. It's that developer guy from your promotion party, the one who kept talking about the waterfront project, Perry Delgado." The name materialized in Corey's mind along with an image of the man's too white smile and expensive suit. He'd been oddly interested in police procedures that night, asking detailed questions about evidence handling and internal investigations. "Stay in your room, sweetheart. Lock the door." Corey was already on his feet, grabbing his jacket. "I'm on my way. Hurry, Dad. They're talking about you. About ruining you." Those words sent a chill down his spine that had nothing to do with betrayal and everything to do with instinct. The same instinct that had kept him alive during his years working narcotics. This wasn't just about infidelity. There was something more sinister at play. He ended the call and immediately dialed another number, moving swiftly through the office. Officers nodded to him as he passed, unaware that their lieutenant's world was crumbling around him. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Q Hess. Q, I need backup at my house. Possible 459 in progress." He kept his voice steady, using the code for burglary rather than explaining the truth. "Meet me there in 10. There was a pause, and Corey could practically see his partner's frown. They'd worked together long enough for Hugh to know when something was off. "You okay, brother?"
No.
Corey pushed through the station's heavy doors into the parking lot. "But I will be." The drive home was a blur of traffic lights and horn blasts as he wove through Portland's afternoon traffic. His mind raced faster than his car, piecing together small details he dismissed over the past few months. Lucia's new yoga classes that ran unusually late. The mysterious text that made her smile when she thought he wasn't looking. The way she'd suddenly become interested in his cases, especially anything involving real estate or development deals. He thought about the Madison case, a wealthy businessman accused of murder, but the evidence had vanished before it could reach the DA's office. Corey had spent months trying to track down the corrupt officer responsible, never imagining the trail might lead back to his own home. His hands tightened on the steering wheel as he remembered how Lucia had consoled him during that investigation, running her fingers through his hair as he worked late into the night, bringing him coffee and sympathy. Had she been laughing at him then? Reporting back to Delgado about his progress, rain began to fall, fat drops spattering against the windshield like tears. Portland's iconic weather, usually a comfortable constant, felt oppressive now. He flipped on his wipers, trying to clear his vision both literally and figuratively. He needed to think straight, to approach this like any other case. Evidence, witnesses, procedure. But this wasn't just any other case. This was his life, his family, his truth shattering into pieces. His phone buzzed again. A text from Jamie. They're still here. I can hear them moving around. Another buzz. Dad, I'm recording some of it on my phone. They keep talking about files and evidence. His daughter, thinking like a cop's kid even in the middle of this nightmare. Pride mingled with heartache as he typed back one-handed. Good girl. Stay safe. Almost there. The residential streets of his neighborhood came into view, lined with blooming cherry trees that seemed to mock the darkness of the moment with their cheerful pink petals. His house, their house, stood at the end of the block, a two-story craftsman they'd bought when Jamie was still in elementary school. Lucia had fallen in love with the wraparound porch and the window seats where she said she'd read stories to their grandchildren someday. Hugh's unmarked car was already parked a discreet distance away, and Corey could see his partner's solid frame leaning against the driver's side door, waiting. They'd been through countless operations together, but nothing had prepared them for this. As Corey pulled into the driveway, he saw movement at his daughter's window. Jamie's face appeared briefly, her features tight with anxiety, before disappearing behind the curtain. He took a deep breath, checked his service weapon, and stepped out into the rain. Hugh approached, his expression grave. Want to tell me what's really going on? Yeah, Corey said, watching water drip from the porch roof. But you're not going to believe it. The rain intensified as Corey briefed Hugh in hushed tones, their backs pressed against the garage door. Water ran down their faces like the tears neither man would acknowledge, and thunder rumbled in the distance. Nature providing a soundtrack to the destruction of a family. Jesus Christ, Hugh muttered when Corey finished. His partner of 8 years ran a hand over his salt and pepper beard, a gesture Corey had seen countless times during difficult cases. Perry Delgado? The same guy who's been all over the news about that waterfront development? And his business partner, according to Jamie. Corey checked his phone again, reading his daughter's latest text. Neil Harmon. The whole thing stinks, Corey. Hugh drew his weapon, checking it with practiced efficiency. 2 high-profile developers don't just happen to be having an affair with the lieutenant's wife. This is something else. Before Corey could respond, the side door opened quietly, and Jamie slipped out. She was still in her school uniform, plaid skirt and navy blazer with the St. Mary's crest. But her usual confident posture was gone, replaced by a tightly wound tension that made her look both younger and older than her 16 years. Jamie, Corey started, but she cut him off, thrusting her phone toward him. I recorded some of it, she whispered, her voice shaking. Rain plastered her dark hair to her face, but she didn't seem to notice. They've been talking about ruining you, Dad. Something about the Madison case, and other things too. Mom. She swallowed hard. Mom's been telling them about your investigations. Hugh took the phone, his expression darkening as he listened through one earbud. This is definitely admissible. Good work, kid. Jamie's laugh was bitter, so unlike her usual bright sound that it made Corey's chest ache. Thanks. For years of your forensics camp finally paid off, Uncle Hugh. A loud male laugh drifted down from the master bedroom window, followed by what sounded like breaking glass. Jamie flinched. Get in my car, Corey told her, pressing his keys into her trembling hands. Lock the doors. If anything happens, if you see anyone besides me or Uncle Hugh come out, you drive straight to the station and ask for Captain Martinez. Understand? She nodded, clutching the keys. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to say something else, but instead, she just hugged him fiercely and whispered, Get them, Dad. Corey watched her sprint through the rain to his car before turning to Hugh. Cover the back entrance. If they try to run, they won't get far. Hugh's voice was grim. Partner, are you sure you want to do this? We could call for backup, make it official. No. Corey checked his weapon one final time. This needs to be me. They moved into position with the synchronization that came from years of working together. Hugh disappeared around the back of the house while Corey approached the front door, his keys sliding into the lock as quietly as possible. The house was different somehow, still filled with familiar furniture and family photos, but it felt like a crime scene now, every surface potentially holding evidence of betrayal. He could hear voices upstairs, growing clearer as he moved toward the staircase. "Doesn't suspect anything," Lucia was saying, her laugh like broken glass in Corey's ears. "He's too busy with that warehouse investigation to notice." Speaking of investigations, a male voice, Delgado's, replied, "We need those files by Friday. The council votes next week, and we can't have any surprises." Corey ascended the stairs silently, years of training taking over. Each step brought new sounds into focus. The rustle of clothing, the clink of glass against glass, murmured conversations about evidence and timelines that confirmed this was far more than an affair. Outside the master bedroom door, he paused. The same door he'd walked through countless times over 16 years of marriage. The door with Jamie's height marks penciled on the frame from when she was small enough to be measured there. Now it was just another barrier between him and the truth. To successful partnerships, another male voice proposed. Harmon, presumably. The sound of clinking glasses followed. Lucia's answering laugh was cut short by the crash of Corey's boot against the door. "Police. Hands where I can see them." The scene that greeted him was like a twisted painting. Lucia perched on the edge of their bed in a silk robe, a champagne flute slipping from her fingers to shatter on the hardwood floor. Perry Delgado and Neil Harmon, both in various states of undress, reaching for clothes and phones. "Corey, wait." Lucia's face had gone chalk white, her carefully applied makeup a mask that couldn't hide her shock. She stood, clutching her robe closed. "This isn't." "Hands where I can see them," he repeated, his voice steady despite the roaring in his ears. "All of you. Now." Delgado recovered first, his developer's smile sliding into place like an expensive suit. "Now, Lieutenant Ramsey, let's be reasonable about this. There's no need for—" "Shut up." Hugh's voice came from the doorway as he entered, weapon trained on Harmon, who had been inching toward his discarded jacket. "Next person who moves gets to explain to the EMTs why they didn't follow a police officer's instructions." The room fell silent except for the sound of rain against the windows and the distant rumble of thunder. Corey could see his reflection in the mirror above the dresser. He looked exactly as he had that morning when he'd kissed Lucia goodbye, except for his eyes. Those belonged to a stranger. "Get dressed," he ordered, his tone professional despite the personal apocalypse unfolding before him. "Slowly. Keep your hands visible." As Delgado and Harmon complied, Lucia took a step toward him. "Corey, please, you don't understand. This isn't what you think." "Really?" His laugh surprised even him with its harshness. "Because what I think is that my wife has been sleeping with two men in my bed while feeding them information about active police investigations. Please, tell me what part of that I'm misunderstanding." She flinched as if he'd struck her, but her chin came up with familiar defiance. "You have no idea what's really going on. If you'd just listen." "Oh, I've been listening." He nodded toward Jamie's phone, which Hugh had set to play on speaker. Lucia's voice filled the room, discussing evidence locations and case details with clinical precision. The color drained from her face again as she recognized her own words. Her eyes darted to the window, to the men now fully dressed, to the door, calculating odds and angles like he'd seen suspects do countless times before. "You really want to add resisting arrest to everything else?" Hugh asked mildly, noting her expression. "Arrest?" Delgado's smile widened, though it didn't reach his eyes. "On what charges, exactly?" "Last I checked, adultery wasn't a crime in Oregon." "No," Corey agreed, "but conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and tampering with evidence are. Not to mention whatever we find when we start digging into that waterfront project you're so worried about." Something flickered in Delgado's eyes, fear or anger. It was hard to tell. But it was Lucia who spoke, her voice taking on an edge Corey had never heard before. "If you arrest them," she said slowly, "I'll tell Internal Affairs you've been accepting bribes. I have proof." The words hung in the air like smoke, poisonous and spreading. Hugh stepped forward, his weapon still trained on Harmon. Proof of what? The Madison case last year. Lucia's smile was a cruel parody of the one in their wedding photos. When certain evidence disappeared, I know where it went and who paid for it to vanish. Corey felt the trap closing around him, pieces clicking into place with terrible clarity. The missing evidence he'd been searching for, the dead ends in his investigation, the way some witnesses had suddenly changed their stories. It all led back to this room, to this moment. You're bluffing, Hugh said, but there was uncertainty in his voice. Am I? Lucia's eyes never left Corey's face. Should we find out? The rain continued to fall outside, washing away cherry blossoms and certainties alike. In the driveway, Jamie waited in the car, clutching her phone full of evidence. Somewhere in the city, files were hidden and lies were waiting to be uncovered. And in this room, in this moment, everything Corey had built his life around was balanced on the edge of destruction. Your move, Lieutenant, Delgado said softly, straightening his tie with manicured fingers. What's it going to be? The next hour unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance of power and manipulation. Hugh had called for a patrol car to escort Delgado and Harmon from the premises, but the familiar snap of handcuffs never came. Instead, the two men walked out under their own power, their expensive shoes clicking against the hardwood floors of Corey's home like miniature thunderclaps. Corey stood at the window, watching as the patrol car's lights painted his rain-slicked driveway in alternating red and blue. Jamie was still in his car, her face illuminated by her phone screen as she presumably backed up her recordings to her cloud storage. Another trick she'd learned at Hugh's forensics camp. The sight of her there, alone but unbowed, made his chest ache. She's quite the detective, your daughter, Lucia said from behind him. She changed into a charcoal gray pantsuit that Corey recognized from her real estate office, her mask of composure firmly back in place. Only the slight tremor in her hands as she lit a cigarette, a habit she'd supposedly quit years ago, betrayed her nervousness. Don't. Corey's voice was granite. Don't talk about her. Hugh paced the bedroom, his prosecutor's mind already building theories. The Madison case evidence. Start talking. Lucia took a long drag of her cigarette, the smoke curling around her like a shield. It's quite simple, really. Last year, when Robert Madison was arrested for the murder of his business partner, certain items were logged into evidence. A bloody shirt, some financial documents, a thumb drive. She tapped her cigarette against a crystal ashtray, a wedding gift from her mother. 3 days later, those items vanished. The official report suggested mishandling during transfer. I remember, Corey said. I spent months trying to find the leak, and you never thought to look closer to home? Her laugh was bitter coffee, dark and brewing. The evidence is in a safety deposit box at First Maritime Bank, along with documentation of every payment made to ensure its temporary misplacement. Hugh's eyes narrowed. Payments to whom? That's the interesting part. Lucia moved to her dresser, opening a drawer to remove a thick manila envelope. The payments were made to an account registered to one Lieutenant Corey Ramsey. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Corey turned from the window, his face a study in controlled fury. You set me up. I protected you. Lucia's composure cracked slightly. You have no idea what they're capable of. What they would have done if I hadn't. If you hadn't what? Hadn't destroyed my career? Hadn't betrayed everything we built together? Built together? Now it was her turn to laugh, but the sound held no humor. You built your career, Corey. I built a cage. The devoted cop's wife, always understanding when you missed dinner, never complaining when you worked weekends, playing hostess at department functions and pretending I didn't have dreams of my own. Hugh moved between them. The evidence, Lucia. The real story. Now. She sank onto the edge of the bed, their bed, and took another drag of her cigarette. It's all in here, she said, patting the manila envelope. Bank records, photographs, even a few creative email chains that show you coordinating with Madison's defense team. All perfectly fabricated, all completely damning. You expect us to believe Delgado went to all this trouble just to frame Corey? Hugh's skepticism was palpable. Believe what you want. Lucia stood, smoothing her slacks with one hand. But if you arrest Perry or Neil, this envelope goes to internal affairs. And trust me, they've laid the groundwork. There are people ready to swear they saw you taking payments, Corey. Other evidence ready to surface about other cases you've handled. By the time they're done, you won't just lose your badge. You'll lose everything. The rain had stopped outside, leaving behind a heavy silence broken only by distant sirens and the soft tick of the bedside clock. An anniversary gift from 6 years ago. Corey looked at his wife, really looked at her, searching for any trace of the woman he'd married. Instead, he saw a stranger wearing familiar skin. Why? The question escaped before he could stop it. Why help them destroy me? Something flickered in Lucia's eyes. Regret, perhaps, or just a reflection of the past. It's complicated. It always is with you. Corey moved to the door, his decision made. Hugh, call Captain Martinez. We need to. I wouldn't. Lucia's voice had regained its edge. You make that call, and I make mine. How long do you think it will take internal affairs to execute a search warrant once they have this? She held up the envelope. How long before they freeze your accounts, suspend you pending investigation? And what happens to Jamie then? The mention of their daughter shifted something in the air. Corey's hand, which had been reaching for his phone, stopped mid-motion. You wouldn't, he said, but uncertainty colored his tone. The woman standing before him was no longer the mother of his child. She was an opponent in a game he was only beginning to understand. Try me. Lucia's smile was all teeth. You arrest them. I destroy you. That's the deal. Take it or leave it. Hugh stepped forward, his face thunderous. This isn't over. No, she agreed, crushing out her cigarette with precise movements. It's just beginning. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to make some calls. You can show yourselves out. Corey felt Hugh's hand on his shoulder, steering him toward the door, but his eyes remained locked on Lucia. She stood framed by their bedroom window, the last rays of evening sun catching her wedding ring. A ring that now felt like a handcuff, binding him to whatever game she was playing. Dad. Jamie's voice from the hallway broke the spell. She stood there in her rain-dampened uniform, her phone clutched to her chest like a shield, looking far too young to be caught in this web of adult betrayals. Let's go, sweetheart. Corey forced his voice to stay steady. We're done here. As they descended the stairs, Hugh in front, Jamie between them, Corey bringing up the rear. The sound of Lucia's heels on the hardwood followed them like gunshots. Each step took them further from the life they'd known this morning, towards something darker and more dangerous than any of them had imagined. Outside, the rain had left everything looking cleaner, fresher. But Corey knew it was an illusion. Somewhere in the city, Perry Delgado was already plotting his next move. Evidence was being planted, stories coordinated, traps laid. And in the house behind them, Lucia was burning the last bridges to her old life, becoming something new and dangerous in the ashes. What now? Jamie asked as they reached the cars, her voice small but determined. Corey looked at his partner, then at his daughter, seeing in both faces the same mix of concern and resolve. They were all he had left now, his real family, forged not in blood or marriage but in truth and trust. Now, he said, we figure out what game they're really playing. And we find a way to win. The Portland sky, true to form, was already gathering new clouds, promising more rain to come. But for now, they stood in the fading light of day, 3 people united against whatever storm was brewing. The first strike had been delivered, the opening moves made. The only question was, who would survive the war to come? Hugh Hess's apartment as Corey stared at the evidence spread across the kitchen table. 3 days had passed since the confrontation at his house, and he hadn't slept more than a few hours each night. Jamie sat beside him, her laptop open to a folder full of screenshots and recordings, while Hugh made another pot of coffee, their 4th since dawn. Start from the beginning, Corey said, rubbing his tired eyes. When did you first notice something was wrong? Jamie pulled up a calendar app on her computer. Remember that charity gala for the Police Athletic League 4 months ago? The one where Mom insisted on wearing her new blue dress. Corey remembered. Lucia had been radiant that night, working the room with practiced ease. He'd been so proud watching her charm the city's elite, never suspecting she was playing a different game entirely. That's where she met them, Jamie continued, clicking through a series of photos she pulled from her mother's iPad. See? Here's Delgado introducing himself, and here's Harmon joining them later. Mom saved these to a hidden folder, but she didn't know I'd figured out her password months ago. Hugh leaned over their shoulders, coffee forgotten. How did you know to look? She started changing after that night. Jamie's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly as she navigated through the files. More gym visits, new clothes, always checking her phone. Then I overheard her on the phone one night, talking about Dad's cases. She didn't use names, but she pulled up an audio file. Listen. Lucia's voice filled the small kitchen. Yes, I saw the files on his desk. The warehouse investigation is focused on the Northside properties. No, he doesn't suspect anything about the waterfront yet. I'll keep you posted. Corey's knuckles whitened around his coffee mug. The warehouse investigation had been confidential, part of a larger probe into money laundering through real estate developments. He'd brought those files home to review, trusting his wife wouldn't betray that trust. There's more, Jamie said softly. Emails, text messages, meeting schedules. She'd delete them from her phone, but they'd still sync to her iPad. She was feeding them information about everything. Ongoing investigations, internal politics, even which officers might be susceptible to bribes. Hugh took over, spreading out printouts of bank statements and property records. Delgado and Harmon have their fingers in every major development project in Portland. The waterfront deal alone is worth billions. But look at this. He pointed to a series of transactions. Shell companies within shell companies, all leading back to offshore accounts. They're laundering money through these developments, using inside information to stay one step ahead of investigations. And my wife is their inside source. Corey stood abruptly, pacing the small kitchen. The morning light caught his wedding ring, and he resisted the urge to throw it through the window. Not just Mom, Jamie interjected. She pulled up another folder. They have other sources. Look at these emails, references to friends in the DA's office, the Planning Commission, even the mayor's office. It's a whole network. Corey leaned against the counter, his detectives mind-piecing together patterns. The charity gala wasn't a coincidence, was it? They chose us. Chose her. They did their homework, Hugh confirmed, pulling out a dossier he'd compiled. Lucia's position at the real estate firm gave her cover for meeting developers. Your promotion to lieutenant put you in charge of major investigations. Jamie's private school connects you to half the power players in Portland. You were the perfect target. A knock at the door made them all freeze. Hugh drew his weapon, moving silently to the peephole, then relaxed. It's Martinez. Captain Elena Martinez entered like a storm front, her dark suit as crisp as her expression. She took in the evidence-strewn table, the exhausted faces, the empty coffee cups, and sighed. Tell me you have something concrete. More than concrete, Jamie said, turning her laptop. I have proof they're planning something big with the waterfront project. Look at these emails. They're worried about someone named Thompson asking too many questions. Martinez's eyes narrowed. Councilman Thompson? He's heading the oversight committee on the waterfront development. And he's not the only one they're watching, Hugh added, passing her a file. There's a journalist, Sarah Chun, who's been digging into their previous projects in other cities. They've got tabs on her too. Corey watched Martinez page through the evidence, her expression growing darker. This is bigger than an affair or leaked information, she said finally. This is organized corruption on a scale we haven't seen before. And my wife is part of it. Corey's voice was raw. The question is, how willing a part? Jamie hesitated, then opened one final folder. There's something else you need to see, Dad. Something about how they really met Mom. A new silence fell over the apartment as fresh revelations emerged, each one adding another layer to the conspiracy they were uncovering. Outside, Portland was waking up, unaware that in this small kitchen, for people were pulling at threads that would eventually unravel the city's power structure. But for now, they were just beginning to understand the scope of what they faced. The affair had been just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath it lay a network of corruption and manipulation that had been years in the making. Hugh refilled their coffee cups, The morning sun now fully illuminating the evidence of betrayal spread across his table. "So," he said, "what's our next move?" Before Corey could answer, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meeting tonight. Waterfront Park. Come alone if you want to know the truth about your wife." Jamie, reading over his shoulder, gripped his arm. "Dad, it's a trap." "Of course it is," Corey replied, showing the message to Martinez. "But it's also an opportunity." Martinez nodded slowly. "We'll need to be careful. If they realize how much we know, they'll bury everything," Hugh finished. "And probably us along with it." Corey looked at his daughter, seeing not the child she'd been but the ally she'd become. "Jamie, I need you to stay with your aunt for a few days. Just until—" "No." She stood, her chin set in a familiar stubborn angle. "I've been gathering evidence for months. I'm part of this now." Martinez studied the girl thoughtfully. "She has a point. She's already proven herself valuable to the investigation." "Investigation?" Hugh raised an eyebrow. "Is that what this is now?" "It is if you want departmental resources," Martinez said. "We do this by the book, mostly. No cowboy tactics, no personal vendettas." She fixed Corey with a stern look. "Think you can handle that?" Corey looked at the evidence surrounding them. Proof of his wife's betrayal, of corruption at the highest levels, of a conspiracy that had targeted his family. By the book wasn't usually his style, but then again, nothing about this situation was usual. "Yeah," he said finally, "I can handle it. But first, we need to understand exactly what game they're playing. And why they chose us," Jamie added softly, her fingers hovering over her laptop keyboard. "There's still something we're missing. Something in Mom's old emails." The morning wore on as they dug deeper, each new piece of evidence revealing another layer of deception. The affair that had shattered Corey's world 3 days ago now seemed almost quaint compared to the web of corruption they were uncovering. But they didn't know they were racing against time. In offices across Portland, phones were ringing, messages were being sent, and plans were being set in motion. The war was about to escalate in ways none of them could have predicted. The suspension notice arrived exactly 1 week after the confrontation at the house. Corey had been expecting it. The anonymous tips to internal affairs about offshore accounts in his name were too well crafted to ignore, but the reality of surrendering his badge and gun still felt like a physical blow. "It's temporary," Martinez assured him in her office, the morning sun glinting off her nameplate. "Just until the investigation clears you." "If it clears me," Corey corrected, placing his service weapon on her desk. The weight of his empty holster felt like a missing limb. "They've done their homework, Captain. The accounts look real. The paper trail is perfect. Too perfect." Martinez tapped her computer screen, displaying bank records that traced a damning path of corruption. "No dirty cop is this organized. They're trying too hard. Tell that to IA." Corey stood by the window, watching officers in the parking lot below. His colleagues, his friends, now looking at him with suspicion in their eyes. "Stevens actually smirked when he handed me the suspension papers. He's wanted to take me down since the Madison case." "Stevens is an idiot," Hugh said from his position by the door. He hadn't left Corey's side since the suspension notice arrived. "But he's a useful idiot. While IA focuses on you, we can—" The office door burst open, cutting him off. Officer Sarah Chun, rookie Corey had mentored, stood there, her face ashen. "Captain, you need to see this. Now." They followed her to the briefing room, where the morning news played on the wall-mounted TV. A reporter stood in front of City Hall, her expression grave. "Breaking news in Portland this morning as Councilman James Thompson, head of the Waterfront Development Oversight Committee, was found dead in his home. Early reports suggest he took his own life, but sources close to the investigation say—" "My ass," Hugh muttered, but Corey barely heard him. His phone had buzzed with a text from Jamie. "Dad, turn on the news. Mom just filed for divorce. She's demanding full custody." The hits kept coming, a 1-2 punch designed to stagger him. But it was the next news story that delivered the knockout blow. In related news, freelance journalist Sarah Chun, known for her investigative work into local development projects, was killed last night in what police are calling a robbery gone wrong. Chun had recently been working on a story about the controversial waterfront development. That's not possible, Officer Chin whispered. I just talked to her yesterday. She said she had proof of. Everyone out, Martinez ordered, her voice cutting through the shock. Except you three. She pointed to Corey, Hugh, and Officer Chin. Once the room cleared, she turned off the TV and locked the door. Talk, she commanded Chun. What did Sarah tell you? The young officer swallowed hard. She said she had documents linking Delgado's projects to similar developments in other cities. Something about a pattern of corruption and convenient accidents. The evidence? Hugh pressed. She was supposed to send it to me last night, but Chin's voice cracked. She never did. Corey's phone buzzed again. Another text from Jamie. Dad, something's wrong. 2 men in suits are watching our house. They've been there all morning. Before he could respond, Martinez's desk phone rang. The conversation was brief, but her expression said everything. Ballistics came back on the Chin shooting, she reported grimly. The bullets match your service weapon, Corey. Hugh exploded. That's impossible. His gun's been in evidence since the suspension. Not that gun, Martinez clarified. His backup piece. The one registered to him personally. Corey felt the trap tightening. The one I keep in my gun safe at home. The combination for which only you and Lucia know, Hugh finished. The pieces were falling into place with terrible precision. Thompson's death removing opposition to the waterfront project. Chun silenced before she could expose the pattern. And all evidence pointing to a disgraced cop with apparent financial motives and means. There's more, Martinez said, checking her computer. Your DNA was found at both scenes, and cell phone records place you in the vicinity during both incidents. They've been planning this for months, Corey realized. Everything, the affair, the threats about the Madison case, Lucia's confession. It was all groundwork for this moment. But why? Chin asked. Why go to all this trouble to frame you? Because I was getting too close, Corey said softly. The warehouse investigation, the financial audits, I was starting to see the pattern without realizing it. They needed me discredited before I could connect the dots. Hugh's phone chimed with an alert. His face darkened as he read. They just issued a warrant for your arrest. Stevens is practically salivating. Martinez stood, her decision made. Officer Chen, you were never here. This conversation never happened. Clear? Chen nodded, understanding the gift of deniability she was being offered. Hugh, get Corey out of here. Use my car. It's in the basement garage. I'll stall Stevens as long as I can. And go where? Corey asked, even as Hugh was checking the hallway. They'll have my house watched. My account's frozen. I know a place, Hugh said. But first, we need to get Jamie. If they're watching your house. Corey was already moving, his empty holster a reminder of how vulnerable they were. His phone buzzed one final time. Another text from Jamie. Dad, Mom's here. She's crying. Says she needs to tell me something important. Hurry, Martinez urged, gathering papers from her desk. I'll do what I can from here, but... A commotion in the hallway cut her off. Stephen's voice carried through the door. Lieutenant Ramsey, this is internal affairs. Come out with your hands up. Corey met Hugh's eyes, saw his own determination reflected there. They had one chance to get ahead of this, to protect Jamie and expose the truth. But first, they had to survive the next 5 minutes. Martinez pointed to her office window. Fire escape. I'll handle Stevens. As they slipped out onto the metal stairway, Corey caught a last glimpse of his captain squaring her shoulders, preparing to face Stevens and buy them precious time. He silently promised to make it count. Your daughter first, Hugh said as they descended. Then we figure out who our real friends are. Corey nodded, his mind already racing ahead to the next moves in this deadly game. They'd framed him, threatened his family, and murdered innocent people to protect their secrets. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated Jamie. What they didn't know was that his daughter had been quietly building her own network of allies, gathering evidence they didn't know existed. Help was coming from an unexpected quarter. They just had to stay alive long enough to reach it. The safe house Hugh had arranged turned out to be a converted industrial loft in the Pearl District, owned by his sister who spent most of her time abroad. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Portland's skyline, but the thick curtains remained drawn. It had been 3 days since their escape from the police station, 3 days of watching news reports paint Corey as a corrupt cop-turned-murderer. Jamie sat cross-legged on the leather sofa, her laptop surrounded by empty energy drink cans and takeout containers. She hadn't slept much since they'd barely managed to extract her from the house before Lucia could spring whatever trap she'd planned. Now, she was their lifeline to the digital world, monitoring police channels and following electronic breadcrumbs. "Someone's been trying to contact me," she announced, breaking the tense silence. "Through my school email. They say they have information about Mom and Delgado." Hugh emerged from the kitchen, gun drawn. "Could be another trap." "No," Jamie said, turning her laptop to show them. "Look at the email signature. Carla Hurley, paralegal at Whitman and Associates. That's Delgado's law firm." Corey leaned in, reading the carefully worded message. "She wants to meet. Says she has documentation of similar operations in other cities. It's not just Portland," a new voice said from the doorway. They all spun around. Hugh's weapon snapped up, then slowly lowered as he recognized Elena Martinez. She wasn't alone. A woman in her early 30s stood beside the captain, her professional attire creased from hours of hiding in Martinez's car. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and she clutched a thick leather briefcase like a shield. "Carla Hurley," Martinez introduced. "She came to my office an hour ago. What she has to say. You need to hear this." Hugh secured the door while Jamie cleared space at the dining table. Carla's hands shook slightly as she opened her briefcase, but her voice was steady. "I've been gathering evidence for months," she began, spreading out folders with methodical precision. "At first, I thought the patterns were coincidental. 3 other cities in the past 5 years, Seattle, Sacramento, San Diego. In each case, the same players, the same methods." She opened the first folder, revealing newspaper clippings and court documents. "They target police officers, specifically ones with wives in positions that give them access to the real estate or financial sectors. The wives are compromised, sometimes through affairs, sometimes blackmail. Then they use them to destroy their husbands when the investigations get too close." Corey studied the documents, his detective's mind cataloging details. "The Thompson murder, Chin's death, they've done this before? Different names, same pattern." Carla pulled out more files. In Seattle, it was a city planning commissioner who had a fatal car accident. In Sacramento, a journalist died in a house fire. San Diego lost a deputy DA to an apparent self-harm. Each death cleared the way for major development projects. Each time, a decorated officer was framed for corruption and murder. Jamie leaned forward, her fingers flying over her keyboard. "The waterfront project, it's not just about money laundering, is it?" Carla's expression darkened. "It's about power, control. They're building a network in every major West Coast city. The developments are just cover for something bigger." "How did you figure it out?" Hugh asked, his natural suspicion warring with hope. "I was assigned to handle document preparation for the waterfront project. Standard contracts, nothing unusual at first. But then I noticed discrepancies in the ownership structures, shell companies that didn't quite line up." She pulled out her phone, showing them a series of photos. "I started staying late, copying files when I could. That's when I overheard Delgado and Harmon discussing their plan for Lieutenant Ramsey." Martinez studied the woman carefully. "Why come forward now? Why risk everything?" "Because they murdered Sarah Chun," Carla said simply. "She was my friend. We met at yoga class last year, started having coffee together. She never knew I worked for Delgado, but she told me about her investigation. When I heard about her death," she swallowed hard. "I couldn't stay silent anymore." "The evidence you've gathered," Corey pressed, "is it enough to clear me?" "Maybe. Combined with what your daughter has." Carla glanced at Jamie with something like admiration. "They didn't expect that, you know. In the other cities, they isolated their targets completely. But they didn't count on Jamie's technical skills or her loyalty." Jamie's laptop chimed with an alert. Her face paled as she read the screen. "Dad, they're making their move. Mom just gave an interview to Channel 8 News. She's telling them everything. the offshore accounts, your supposed connection to Thompson's death, even suggesting you were abusive. Corey felt the last pieces of his old life crumbling. The woman he'd loved for 16 years was systematically destroying him on live television. We need to move fast, Martinez said. Carla's evidence gives us a pattern, but we need concrete proof linking Delgado and Harmon to the murders. There might be a way, Carla said hesitantly. Delgado keeps detailed records of everything. It's like insurance against betrayal. Files, recordings, documentation of every operation. They're in his private office at the firm, which we can't get anywhere near, Hugh pointed out. Every cop in Portland is looking for Corey. Not every cop, Martinez corrected. She pulled out her phone, showing them a text message. I still have friends in the department. Good ones. Officers who don't believe the frame job. A slow smile spread across Jamie's face. And I have every email Mom ever deleted, every meeting she scheduled with Delgado and Harmon. If we cross-reference those with the pattern Carla found, we can prove they orchestrated everything, Corey finished. The affairs, the murders, the frame-up. All of it, Carla nodded. But we have to move carefully. If they realize I've turned, she didn't need to finish the sentence. Sarah Chin's fate was warning enough. You'll need protection, Martinez said. Hugh, already on it. He was on his phone, texting rapidly. I know some people who can keep her safe. Off the grid. Outside, the Portland sky was darkening with approaching rain. Through a gap in the curtains, Corey could see the waterfront where Delgado's project was reshaping the city skyline. Somewhere in those gleaming towers of glass and steel, the evidence they needed was waiting. Okay, he said, turning back to the group. Let's build a plan. But first, he looked at Carla solemnly. Thank you for coming forward, for risking everything. She met his gaze steadily. Thank me when we take them down. All of them. Jamie was already creating a secure chat channel for them to communicate, while Hugh and Martinez began mapping out security protocols. As the group bent over their work, Corey felt something he hadn't experienced since this nightmare began. Hope. They had allies now. They had evidence. They had a chance. But in his gut, he knew the worst was yet to come. Delgado and his organization wouldn't go down without a fight. And somewhere across the city, Lucia was still playing her part in their deadly game. The war was far from over. In fact, it was about to enter its most dangerous phase. The conference room in the FBI's Portland field office hummed with tension as Corey, Hugh, Carla, and Jamie gathered around a table covered with surveillance photos and building plans. 2 weeks had passed since Carla's revelation about Delgado's pattern of corruption, and they'd spent every moment preparing for what came next. Special Agent Diana Walsh, a veteran of the Bureau's Public Corruption Unit, studied the blueprints of Delgado's waterfront office complex. The timing has to be perfect, she said, tapping a manicured nail against the paper. If he suspects it's a trap before we have concrete evidence, he'll destroy everything and disappear, Carla finished. Dark circles under her eyes testified to sleepless nights spent documenting Delgado's operation. Just like in Seattle and Sacramento, Hugh stretched his broad shoulders, working out the kinks from hours of planning. So we give him something he can't ignore. Something that plays to his ego. And his paranoia, Jamie added from her workstation, where 3 laptops displayed various surveillance feeds. She'd spent the past week setting up a sophisticated monitoring system that would make most intelligence agencies envious. The bigger the threat seems, the more likely he is to act personally instead of sending someone else. Corey watched his daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. She'd grown up too fast in these past weeks, her childhood innocence sacrificed to necessity. But there was no denying her capabilities had been crucial to their operation. What about this? Carla pulled up an email draft on her secure tablet. An anonymous tip to several news outlets about a secret grand jury investigation into the waterfront project, specifically mentioning possible RICO charges and cooperative witnesses. Agent Walsh nodded slowly. That would get his attention. He's built his entire empire on keeping his hands clean, letting others take the fall. The threat of RICO charges would force him to act. We'll need more than just the tip, Hugh cautioned. He'll verify through his sources in the courthouse. Jamie's fingers flew over her keyboard. Already on it. I can create digital traces of the grand jury documents. Just enough to show up if his people go looking, not enough to trigger any real clerk's attention. Your daughter's scary good at this, Walsh muttered to Corey. You have no idea, he replied, but his attention was on the building plans. The real question is, where do we set the meeting? Carla pointed to a corner office on the 20th floor. His private conference room. He keeps sensitive documents in a hidden safe behind the east wall panel. That's where he'll go when he thinks he needs to destroy evidence. It's also where he takes meetings he doesn't want witnessed, Hugh added grimly. Perfect place for dealing with threats. Walsh turned to Jamie. You're sure you can get cameras in there? Already have. Jamie pulled up a feed on one of her screens, showing the elegant conference room from 3 different angles. Planted them last week when the cleaning crew did their monthly deep clean. The feeds route through 4 different proxy servers before reaching us. Corey studied the camera angles, his cop's instincts noting entry points and potential cover. We'll need a reason for him to call a meeting there specifically. Something that would make him feel in control. What about Lucia? Carla suggested quietly. The room fell silent. Corey's ex-wife had been making regular appearances on local news, painting him as a corrupt cop who'd threatened her into silence for years. Her performances were convincing, too convincing for comfort. She's still reporting everything to him, Jamie said, her voice hard. I've been monitoring her communications. She tells him every time someone from the department reaches out to her, every rumor she hears. Then we use that, Walsh decided. We let her discover something about the grand jury investigation. Something she'll think proves her loyalty when she reports it. She'll want to deliver the information in person, Carla added. She always does with important intel. Says she doesn't trust phones. Hugh leaned forward, his expression concerned. You sure about this, partner? Using her as bait? Corey remembered the look in Lucia's eyes when she'd threatened him with the Madison case evidence, the cold calculation that had replaced 16 years of love. She made her choice, he said finally. Now we use it against them. Jamie pulled up another window on her center screen. I can fabricate some evidence trails that would look legitimate to Mom, but actually lead nowhere. Make her think she's found something crucial. Do it, Walsh ordered. But remember, we need Delgado on camera explicitly ordering a hit or admitting to the previous murders. Anything less, and his lawyers will tear it apart. There's something else, Carla said hesitantly. Something I haven't mentioned yet. She reached into her briefcase and withdrew a small recorder. Last month, before I came to you, I was in his office late one night. He was there with Harmon, drinking and celebrating the Thompson death. I managed to record part of their conversation. The recorder held only fragments, too broken and muffled to use in court, but it confirmed their suspicions. Delgado and Harmon had orchestrated everything, using a network of corrupted officials and compromised spouses to build their empire. This is how we nail him, Walsh said after listening. We make him think there's another recording out there, something clear enough to destroy him. He'll want to handle it personally. The plan came together over the next hour. Leak the grand jury story, plant evidence of a damaging recording, let Lucia discover it, and wait for Delgado to spring their trap. Each step was carefully choreographed, each contingency considered. One thing bothers me, Hugh said as they wrapped up. What if Lucia knows more than we think? What if she's playing her own game? Corey watched Jamie programming the last of her digital breadcrumbs. Then we adapt. That's what cops do. Speaking of adapting, Walsh interjected, all our surveillance shows Delgado's been meeting regularly with Judge Harrison, the one who signed the warrants for your arrest. If he suspects anything, he won't, Carla assured them. I've worked for him for 3 years. When he feels threatened, he gets tunnel vision. He'll be so focused on containing the grand jury leak, he won't see what's really happening. They spent another hour refining details before Walsh called it a night. As the others filed out, Corey remained at the table, staring at surveillance photos of the man who'd systematically destroyed his life. Dad. Jamie stood in the doorway, her laptop bag slung over one shoulder. You okay? He managed a smile for her benefit. Just thinking about Karma. Karma needs help sometimes, she replied with a wisdom beyond her years. That's why we're here. The next day, their plan began. News outlets received anonymous tips about the grand jury investigation. Digital traces appeared in courthouse computers. Lucia's sources began feeding her carefully crafted information. And in his waterfront office, Perry Delgado received the first whispers of a threat to everything he'd built. Just as planned, he moved to eliminate it, not knowing that this time, his target was ready. The trap was set. Now they just had to survive what came next. Lucia Carver sat in her parked car outside Delgado's office building, her manicured nails drumming an anxious rhythm on the steering wheel. The USB drive in her purse felt like a live grenade, its contents potentially devastating to everyone involved. She'd found the files buried in an encrypted folder on an old backup drive, supposedly dating from before her separation from Corey. Email chains, voice recordings, calendar entries, all pointing to a massive conspiracy centered around the waterfront project. And now, with rumors of a grand jury investigation swirling, the timing couldn't be worse. Her phone buzzed, a text from Delgado demanding an update. She'd been sitting here for 20 minutes, wrestling with decisions she'd thought were already made. The weight of recent events, Thompson's death, the journalist's murder, pressed down on her like physical things. This wasn't supposed to happen, she whispered to her reflection in the rearview mirror. The face that looked back was perfectly made up, but her eyes held shadows that no concealer could hide. The elevator ride to the 20th floor gave her time to compose herself, to remember why she'd made the choices that led here. Delgado had saved her when she'd been desperate, helped her escape the cage of being a cop's wife. The fact that he'd used that escape to destroy Corey was just business, nothing personal. But as she approached his private conference room, another memory surfaced. Jamie's face the last time she'd seen her daughter, full of hurt and betrayal. "How could you, Mom?" she'd asked. "How could you help them do this to Dad?" The conference room door opened before she could knock. Perry Delgado stood there in one of his perfectly tailored suits, his developer's smile barely masking his impatience. Behind him, Neil Harmon paced by the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked their waterfront empire. "You're late," Delgado said, ushering her inside. What was so important it couldn't wait until morning? Lucia set her purse on the polished conference table, noting the half-empty whiskey glasses. They'd been celebrating something, or drowning their concerns about the grand jury rumors. "I found something," she began, reaching for the USB drive. Something that could. A commotion in the outer office interrupted her. Raised voices, the sound of running feet. Then the door burst open again, admitting a security guard whose face showed barely controlled panic. "Sir, we have a problem. The FBI is in the lobby with warrants. They're saying something about witness testimony and recorded evidence." Delgado's smile vanished. "Stall them. Use every procedure in the book. Neil, start the protocol." Harmon moved to the eastern wall panel, pressing hidden catches to reveal a wall safe. "If they have warrants, we don't have much time." "What's happening?" Lucia asked, though she already knew. Everything was unraveling, just like in those other cities Delgado had mentioned during their late-night strategy sessions. "Insurance," Delgado said shortly, moving to help Harmon empty the safe. "Every empire needs insurance." But as they pulled out stacks of documents and hard drives, Delgado's phone buzzed. His face darkened as he read the message. "It's a trap," he announced, his voice deadly calm. "Someone sold us out." His eyes fixed on Lucia, who took an involuntary step backward. "Perry, I don't know what. You've been meeting with him, haven't you?" Delgado advanced slowly, his charm replaced by something much colder. "Your ex-husband. Did you think we wouldn't know? That we wouldn't be watching?" "What?" "No." The denial came automatically, but fear made her voice shake. "I've done everything you asked. I destroyed his reputation, his career, and yet here we are." Delgado nodded to Harmon, who moved to block the door. "FBI in my lobby, grand jury investigations appearing out of nowhere, and you showing up with mysterious evidence right when it all starts falling apart." The truth hit her like a physical blow. The grand jury investigation? It's not real, is it? This whole thing was a setup. Of course it was. Delgado's laugh held no humor. "And you led them right to us, didn't you? Just like a good little double agent." "No," she protested, but the pieces were falling into place. The convenient discovery of the files, the timing of everything. She'd been played. By Corey? By Jamie? It didn't matter now. I trusted you, Lucia. Delgado moved to the wet bar, pouring another drink with steady hands. Gave you everything you wanted. Freedom. Power. A chance to be more than just some cop's wife. And this is how you repay me? Perry, please. She backed away from his advance. I didn't betray you. I wouldn't. After everything we've done. Everything we've done? His smile was terrible now. You mean like Thompson? Like that nosy reporter? Tell me, Lucia, did you think those were accidents? The room seemed to tilt sideways as implications crashed over her. You killed them? We did what was necessary. He sipped his whiskey, watching her over the rim of the glass. Just like we're going to do what's necessary now. Horror rose in her throat as the full scope of her situation became clear. She hadn't just been an accomplice to affairs and corruption, she'd helped cover up murders. And now, Perry, she tried one last time. Everything I did for you. For us. I know. He set down his glass with exaggerated care. That's what makes this so disappointing. The gunshot took her completely by surprise. For a moment, she thought he'd missed. There was no pain, just a strange pressure in her chest. Then she looked down and saw the spreading red stain on her silk blouse. Sorry, my dear, Delgado said, lowering the weapon, but we can't have any loose ends. Especially not ones that might flip on us. Lucia's knees buckled. As she fell, her hand caught the edge of the conference table, pulling her purse down with her. The contents scattered across the floor. Lipstick, phone, car keys, and a small black device that looked exactly like a wireless microphone. Delgado's eyes widened as he recognized the implications. You were wearing a wire? But Lucia wasn't looking at him anymore. She was staring past him, at the eastern wall where a panel had silently slid aside. Armed figures in FBI tactical gear poured through the opening, led by Corey and Hugh. Federal agents. The shouts seemed to come from everywhere at once. Drop your weapons. Hands where we can see them. Delgado spun to face the new threat, his gun coming up instinctively. 3 shots rang out almost simultaneously. He staggered, the weapon falling from nerveless fingers, a look of almost comical surprise on his face as he collapsed. The rest was chaos. Harmon being tackled and cuffed, agents securing the room, paramedics rushing to where Lucia lay bleeding on the imported carpet. Through it all, she kept her eyes on Corey, who knelt beside her with pressure bandages. You knew, she whispered. You knew I'd figure it out eventually. We hoped. His voice was gentle despite everything. Jamie said you weren't a killer. That once you understood what they really were. Jamie. Tears mixed with the metallic taste in her mouth. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her. Tell her yourself. He pressed harder on the wound. Stay with us, Lucia. Help is here. As consciousness faded, she heard Delgado being read his rights, heard him raging about corrupt judges and political connections. But all she could think about was her daughter, and how much time she had to waste before finally doing the right thing. The last thing she saw before the darkness took her was Corey's face, set in the same expression of concern she'd seen countless times during their marriage. Even now, after everything, he was trying to save her. She didn't deserve it, but maybe, if she survived, she could earn it back. The federal courthouse in downtown Portland buzzed with anticipation on a crisp morning 6 months after the showdown in Delgado's office. Journalists crowded the steps, their cameras trained on the entrance where a parade of black SUVs deposited witnesses and attorneys. Inside courtroom 3, Corey sat with Jamie in the front row behind the prosecution's table. Hugh occupied the seat on Jamie's other side, while Carla Hurley sat directly across the aisle, her testimony already given but her presence required for the final phase of the trial. The past months had been a blur of grand jury hearings, evidence processing, and witness preparations. Delgado's arrest had triggered a cascade of revelations as his carefully constructed network began to crumble. Judges, politicians, business leaders, all scrambling to make deals as the full scope of the conspiracy emerged. All rise. The bailiff's voice cut through the murmur of conversation. The United States District Court for the District of Oregon is now in session, the Honorable Patricia Chun presiding. As the gallery stood, Corey caught sight of Lucia being led in through a side door by federal marshals. She looked smaller somehow, her designer clothes replaced by a conservative suit that seemed to hang loosely on her frame. The shooting had left its marks, a slight limp, a new hesitancy in her movements. But her head was held high as she took her place at the witness stand. Perry Delgado sat at the defense table, his usual swagger diminished by an orange jumpsuit but not entirely gone. He didn't look at Lucia as she was sworn in, but his jaw tightened visibly when she began to speak. "Please state your name for the record," the prosecutor requested. "Lucia Marie Carver." "And how do you know the defendant, Perry Delgado?" Lucia's eyes flickered briefly to Corey before focusing on the prosecutor. "He recruited me to spy on my husband, Lieutenant Corey Ramsey, and helped destroy his career when he got too close to exposing their corruption." For the next 2 hours, Lucia laid out the entire conspiracy. She detailed how Delgado had initially approached her, using her frustration with being just a cop's wife to turn her against Corey. She described the elaborate scheme to frame him for corruption, the manipulation of evidence, and finally, the murders that she hadn't known about until it was almost too late. "And what happened when you discovered the truth about the deaths of Councilman Thompson and Ms. Chun?" the prosecutor asked. "I confronted Perry, Mr. Delgado, in his office. That's when he shot me." Lucia's voice remained steady. "He admitted orchestrating their murders to protect the waterfront project. It's all on the recording from the wire I was wearing." The courtroom speakers crackled to life, playing the damning conversation. Delgado's voice filled the room. "We did what was necessary." The sound of the gunshot made several jurors flinch. Jamie squeezed Corey's hand as they listened. She'd been the one to suggest positioning FBI tactical teams behind the hidden panel in Delgado's conference room, remembering details from the building plans she'd studied. Her technical skills had also ensured the recording would be crystal clear, admissible evidence that not even Delgado's expensive lawyers could challenge. The defense's cross-examination was brutal but futile. They tried to paint Lucia as an opportunist who turned on Delgado only to save herself, but the evidence was too strong. The recordings, the documented pattern of similar operations in other cities, the testimony of other witnesses who had already pled guilty, it all pointed to Delgado's guilt. When the verdict came 3 days later, no one was surprised. Guilty on all counts: conspiracy, corruption, murder, attempted murder. The judge's sentence was equally predictable: life without parole. The aftermath happened quickly. Delgado's organization was dismantled, his assets seized, his corrupt network exposed and prosecuted. Lucia, in exchange for her cooperation and testimony, received a reduced sentence of 5 years, followed by witness protection. On the day she signed away custody of Jamie and prepared to begin her sentence, she asked to speak with him privately in the courthouse conference room. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," she began, her hands twisting together. "What I did to both of you was unforgivable," Jamie finished, but her voice held more sadness than anger now. "But you tried to make it right in the end." "Too late," Lucia whispered. "Far too late." Corey studied the woman he'd loved for 16 years, seeing both the person she'd been and the one she'd become. "It's never too late to choose the truth, Lucia. You taught Jamie that, at least." Tears spilled down Lucia's cheeks. A marshal appeared at the door, signaling their time was up. She hugged Jamie one last time, whispered, "I'm so proud of you," and then she was gone. 1 year later, Corey sat in his restored office at the Portland Police Bureau, looking at a new family photo on his desk. It showed him and Jamie at her high school graduation, both smiling genuinely despite, or perhaps because of, everything they'd survived. The ceremony had been remarkable not just for Jamie's valedictorian speech about courage and truth, but for how she'd managed to draw lessons from their experience without revealing the classified details. She'd spoken about integrity, about standing up for what's right even when it costs you everything you thought you wanted. "You know what, Dad?" she'd said after the ceremony, as they stood looking out over the city they'd helped clean up. "Sometimes the worst betrayals lead us to our best selves." Corey smiled at the memory, touching the frame of the photo. His daughter had grown into an extraordinary young woman, stronger and wiser for having faced the darkness and chosen light. And he had learned that family wasn't always about blood or marriage. Sometimes it was about the people who stood beside you when the world fell apart. Outside his office window, Portland's skyline stretched toward the clouds, the waterfront project now under new, legitimate management. The city had survived its brush with corruption, emerging stronger and more vigilant. Just like him. Just like Jamie. He couldn't have said it better himself. Epilogue. 10 years later. Portland Police Bureau's Memorial Garden as Corey Ramsey, now chief of police, stood before the newly unveiled monument. The polished granite wall bore the names of officers lost in the line of duty, but his attention was drawn to the adjacent plaque commemorating those who'd exposed the largest corruption scandal in the city's history. At 55, silver had begun to thread through his dark hair, and the lines around his eyes told stories of both laughter and hardship. He traced his fingers over the etched words, remembering the day 10 years ago when everything had changed. "Penny for your thoughts, Chief?" Hugh Hess approached, walking with a slight limp, a souvenir from a shootout 3 years ago that had led to his retirement from active duty. Now he served as a special advisor to the department's anti-corruption task force, using his experience from the Delgado case to train a new generation of officers. "Just thinking about karma," Corey replied, echoing words from long ago. "Have you seen the morning paper?" Hugh nodded grimly. Perry Delgado was found dead in his cell at USP Leavenworth. Apparent heart attack, though given his enemies, he shrugged. "The official statement says natural causes. Nothing natural about any of it," Corey said quietly. "Neil Harmon hanged himself last month in his medium security facility. 2 weeks after his appeal was denied." They walked together through the garden, their footsteps crunching on fallen leaves. The waterfront district sprawled before them, transformed from Delgado's vision of corruption into a thriving community space. The buildings that had once symbolized his empire now housed tech startups, art galleries, and a community college campus. "Heard from Martinez lately?" Hugh asked as they reached a bench overlooking the river. "She's loving her role as FBI deputy director in D.C." Corey smiled. "Says she's using the Delgado case as a training model for complex corruption investigations. Carla's helping her develop the curriculum." Carla Hurley had transformed from a reluctant whistleblower into one of the Bureau's most valued consultants on corporate corruption. Her detailed documentation of Delgado's methods had helped uncover similar schemes in cities across the country, leading to dozens of convictions and systematic reforms in urban development oversight. "And Jamie? How's she handling the news about Delgado?" Pride warmed Corey's voice. "She's focused on her work. Just made partner at her cybersecurity firm. They're contracted with half the federal agencies in Washington now." He paused, remembering his daughter's graduation speech all those years ago. "She's presenting at a law enforcement conference next month, teaching cops how to spot digital evidence of corruption patterns." Hugh was quiet for a moment, then asked the question they both knew was coming. "Any word about Lucia?" The familiar ache surfaced, duller now but never quite gone. "She completed her sentence 5 years ago. Witness protection moved her somewhere in the Southwest. Jamie gets a letter every birthday. No return address, but the postmarks are always different. She's still running," Hugh observed. "Can you blame her? Half of Delgado's network may be in prison, but the other half is still out there. Some of them blame her more than him for bringing it all down." They sat in companionable silence, watching boats navigate the river. The city had healed from its wounds, much as they had, but the scars remained as reminders. "Remember that rookie, Chan?" Hugh asked suddenly. "The one who helped us during the investigation? Not so rookie anymore. She's heading up major crimes now. Did you know she started a mentorship program for female officers? Named it after Sarah Chun, the journalist Delgado had killed." Their conversation was interrupted by a text message chiming on Corey's phone. The screen showed a message from Jamie. "Dad, check your email. You need to see this." He pulled up his email to find a forwarded news article from a small Arizona newspaper. The headline made his breath catch. "Local art teacher's past catches up. Former police lieutenant's wife speaks out about corruption, redemption." "Lucia," Hugh breathed, reading over his shoulder. "She's finally telling her story." The article was remarkably detailed. Lucia, now using her mother's maiden name, had built a quiet life teaching art to underprivileged children. When a student's parent recognized her from old news coverage, she chose to embrace the truth rather than run again. I live with my choices every day, Corey read aloud from the article. The worst isn't the loss of status or comfort. It's knowing I betrayed the two people who loved me most, all because I was too proud to admit I needed help, too afraid to be honest about my unhappiness. Another text from Jamie appeared. She's doing good work, Dad. Those kids love her. Maybe that's her redemption. Hugh squeezed his friend's shoulder. You raised one wise daughter. She raised herself, those last few years. Corey pocketed his phone, standing to face the city he'd sworn to protect. We all did what we had to do. As if summoned by memory, Elena Martinez's name appeared on his phone. The former captain, now FBI deputy director, rarely called without good reason. Ramsey, he answered. Chief. Martinez's voice was tight with urgency. We've got something. Remember those offshore accounts Delgado used to transfer funds? We just found new activity. Similar patterns showing up in 3 cities along the East Coast. His playbook, Corey said, already moving toward his car with Hugh falling into step beside him. Someone's using his playbook. Exactly. I need your team's expertise. Your daughter's too, if she's willing. This could be bigger than Delgado. Corey caught Hugh's eye, saw the same fire that had driven them a decade ago. Send everything you have. We'll assemble the team. As they drove back to headquarters, Corey reflected on how life had come full circle. The lessons learned from betrayal and corruption had forged them all into something stronger. Lucia found her redemption teaching children. Jamie transformed her pain into purpose. Hugh, Martinez, Carla. They'd all carried their experiences forward, using them to protect others. The next morning's paper would announce Delgado's death in a 3-line obituary, an inglorious end to a man who'd once terrorized a city. But his true legacy lived on in the systems built to prevent others from following his path, in the vigilance of those he'd tried to destroy. Corey's phone buzzed with another text from Jamie. Coming home for this one, Dad. Someone needs to keep you and Uncle Hugh from doing anything crazy. He smiled, remembering her words from graduation. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead us to our best selves. She'd been right then, and she was right now. They'd all found their best selves in the aftermath of betrayal. Even Lucia, in her own way, teaching art to children who needed hope. The sun was setting over Portland as Corey and Hugh pulled into the bureau parking lot. Martinez had already sent the first batch of files, and Jamie's plane would land in 3 hours. Another case, another chance to protect their city. Ready for one more round? Hugh asked as they headed inside. Corey thought about all they'd lost and gained, about betrayal and redemption, about the endless cycle of corruption and justice. Always, he said, that's what family does. And in the end, that's what they'd become. A family forged in fire, stronger for having been broken, wiser for having survived. The truth had cost them dearly, but it had given them something precious in return. The knowledge that even in the darkest moments, light could be found if you were brave enough to face it. The city lights began to twinkle on as night fell, each one a reminder of the lives they'd sworn to protect. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles against corruption and greed. But tonight, they would remember how far they'd come and draw strength from the journey that had led them here. In her Arizona classroom, Lucia would be cleaning up after her students, perhaps pausing to look at the secret photo she kept in her desk, Jamie's graduation picture, sent anonymously years ago. In Washington, Martinez would be assembling her task force, while Carla prepared another training session on spotting corruption patterns. And somewhere over the Rockies, Jamie would be on her way home, ready to help protect the city that had shaped them all. The wheel turned, justice moved forward, and the truth, as always, carved its own path through the darkness toward light. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.